Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another episode of this fascinating video series on the historical criticism of Islam. Let's call it early Islam to be specific. And if you've been tracking with us, you've noticed that we have really highlighted a number of problems, at least related to what we call the Standard Islamic Narrative. We focused on the problem with the sources itself, but today we are going to turn our attention to the problems with the place, and that's Mecca. With me here, as always, our dear brother and our friend, Dr. J. Smith. Dr. J, as always, it's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for this wonderful research and this material. And obviously, we want to encourage Muslims to first hear you out, hear the material, investigate it if necessary, before they jump into any conclusions, meaning making accusations against you or against me as if we are trying just to get views, or just say things that are not substantiated. For instance, right now, you're going to talk about the problem with the place. What are we dealing with?
The place, Mecca itself. Now, just to make sure that we correct that we get the correction, I didn't do any of this research. It is other people's research. I want to make the record straight. All I am doing and all you're doing is communicate what others have researched.
That's right.
We are taking it, we're encapsulating it, and we're putting it into sound bites that people can understand. I'm the one that puts it onto maps and put it onto timelines. Yes, I'm responsible for that. That's so we communicate it better so people can actually visualize it. We're finding, just like we're using videos, we could write this up in a book, but we're using videos because people can see it on a video. They can see the timelines, they can see the maps, they can see the pictures, they can see the writings on the manuscripts that we're going to be showing later on. This is very important so people can actually, once they visualize it, then of course, then they can communicate it to their own people in their own place, in their own time. So we're going to zero in on Mecca.
So why Mecca?
Okay, and actually I was going to ask you why Mecca, because I know why I want to go with Mecca. I want to see what you think. Why should we go to Mecca?
Well, Mecca, of course. I mean, let's talk as someone who followed Islam. You say Mecca, here is what comes to my mind immediately. The birthplace of the Prophet. Mecca, the start of a religion called Islam that was following. Mecca, that's what I face when I'm praying daily. And when I want to go and do the pilgrimage, that's where I start, for instance. And the list can go on and on and on.
Yeah, everything we know about Islam is dependent on this one city, Mecca. It all happens here. Historically, even before Muhammad, even before Islam began, Mecca is the center of history. Mecca is where all things happen from God. So that's why Mecca is absolutely important. And it's not us saying this. You don't say it. I don't say it. The Standard Islamic Narrative has made that very clear, right, that Mecca, for them, they are absolutely dependent on Mecca. So that's why we're zeroing in at the very beginning of these three categories. The book, the man, and the place, we're starting with the place. We're kind of flipping it backwards.
Right.
We should have gone with the book, the man, and the place, like I've always said. But no, I'm going to do just the opposite. I'm going to start with the place, the man, and the book. So starting with Mecca. Therefore, every Muslim that's listening and every Muslim that we're going to meet is absolutely dependent on Mecca. All Muslims follow the Standard Islamic Narrative. They have to. They have no other choice. There's no other narrative that they can go to. There are no other traditions that they can point to. And they have always had to depend on these. These traditions, they assumed, came from the time of the Prophet and the place of the Prophet. And we've shut that down in the last episodes, the last 10 episodes that we did, pretty much shut that down categorically. Nobody can say anymore today, after what we have shown, that they came from the place the Prophet lived or the time the Prophet lived. That 9th and 10th century is too late, and Baghdad and Bahara and Tabaristan, these are too far away, just too far north and too many hundreds of years later. So what we're going to put down is, let's then go to this place. Since you say it happened in Mecca, since everything is dependent on Mecca, let's see if it actually did exist. So to do that, if we can get rid of Mecca, if we can shut down Mecca, which I want to do now, we shut down the other two. So it's a quick way, a quick step. And I would say this to anybody who is engaging with Muslims on the historical argument or the historical critique: start with Mecca. like we're going to start with Mecca, because once you shut down Mecca, that shuts down the Standard Islamic Narrative. Since everything is dependent on this place, start with the place. It's the easiest to start. You'll see why as we go through these episodes. So let's look at the claims. Let's look at the claims that about Mecca that we see. Let's now go to the slides and see what the Muslims are claiming. Mecca is the oldest and best known city in history, is the first claim they make.
Absolutely. I mean, I believed it with all my heart.
Why?
It was the center of basically trade, for instance.
No, before that, why is it the best known, the oldest?
I mean, we're taking it all the way back, like you said, to the days of Adam and Eve.
So
I mean,
Adam and Eve were living in Mecca.
right?
Can you get anybody earlier than Adam and Eve?
Now these are the first two couple, basically. The first two. I mean,
The first man, the first woman.
Yeah.
So there's no one earlier than Adam and Eve. If both Adam and Eve lived there, according to the traditions, according to the Quran, chapter 7, verse 24, stipulates that Adam and Eve were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. That is way up in
Right.
space. And they were thrown down to where? Well, you go to the traditions, and they say very clearly that Adam was thrown down to Sri Lanka, which is just south of India, that little island south of India. Today, it used to be called Ceylon. And Eve was thrown on to Mecca. And then Adam suddenly just stands up. He's 90 feet tall, and he just starts striding, boom, 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 and just strides up all the way from Sri Lanka all the way up to Mecca. Now,
To
again, the
Arafat.
traditions say this.
Yeah, to Arafat, the Mount Arafat, which means that's where they reunite.
Really nice. Here's a picture of Arafat. We were going to put that up there, but this is the idea. The Arafat. You've been to Arafat. You've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the pilgrimage, you have to go through it.
You have to go. It's one of the 5 stages on the Hajj. So here is Mecca, Adam and Eve. Nothing earlier than that. There cannot be any habitation earlier than that, because in order to have a habitation, you have to have people. In order to have people, you have to have a man and a woman. The first are Adam and Eve. So it's the oldest, right? It's the oldest. Now, we also see from that it is also where Abraham lived.
Right?
Why is that important?
Well, I mean, here's the story. Abraham, as you know, the story of Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. And, technically speaking, what happened is like Hagar and her son Ishmael ended up leaving the promised land, going all the way down to Mecca, where allegedly Abraham later joined them. And then he built basically the Kaaba in there, him and his son, and established what we know today as the rituals or the traditions of the religion called Islam. So that's why Abraham is a big deal, not to mention, of course, the claim that Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael through Abraham as well.
Now, just to be fair, there are variations on that. Some
Of course.
Muslims say that Abraham was born and grew up there, and that he did not establish, he did not create it. It had been broken down, and he and Ishmael rebuilt it. So that means it was there earlier than Abraham. Nonetheless, what's important for our
Well, the
discussion,
foundation was there. They just built.
Okay, so for our discussion today, Abraham is living in Mecca in 1900 BC. So that's pretty important. That's pretty, if you look at chapter 21 of the Quran, you see him going into the Kaaba and taking a large idol and destroying all the smaller idols. He comes out of the Kaaba. The next morning, the other Muslims who are there living in Mecca, they go in, they see all the destroyed idols. They confront Abraham and says, "What have you done?" He said, "Well, talk to the big idol. Don't talk to me." Well, of course, you can't talk to a big idol. So they take him and they throw him into a fiery pit from which he is then rescued. So that story is in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71 in the Quran.
Right.
It doesn't say Mecca, by the way, anywhere there. Did you notice that? The word Mecca is not in that
But
chapter.
it's mentioned in other places, the connection between him and the area, like chapter 37, for instance, makes that connection.
Okay, but that doesn't say Mecca either.
I know, the name doesn't, but Muslims will use these verses to try to make it sound to you that that's Mecca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the place of the prophet. It's the place of the representative.
Right.
It's that. There's only one place that says Mecca, and that's in chapter 48, verse 24, which is ironic if this is such an important city.
Right, one name in the correct spelling.
That's right. Becca is also referred to, but we know that's Becca, the valley of Becca, which is much further north.
Yeah.
Now, that's the second. So the third claim is that it was the center of trade north, south, east, and west. That's why Muhammad became important, because he was a trader. His wife, Khadija, was a trader. She had caravans going up to Gaza in the north, and so she employed him. She was older than him. She was very rich. Muhammad was not very rich, so he became a caravaneer for her. So that's certainly another claim that they make. And we're going to talk about Montgomery Watt's trade route theory and how that was debunked. But we're coming up to that. That's something that lands. But certainly these are the three claims that they make. All three of them are hugely important. Why? Well, the conclusion is, if Mecca is at the time of Adam and Eve, whatever that time period is, but that's in chapter 7, verse 24. If Mecca is where Abraham lived and destroyed the idols in chapter 21, verse 51 to 71 in the Quran, and if Mecca it was at the center of trade north, south, east, and west, then someone, somewhere, should have said something about it.
Absolutely.
There should be some documents to
Absolutely. I mean, if it is such a big deal. I mean, like Rome, for instance, take Rome as an example. Alexandria is another example. Jerusalem, all of those. Damascus, by the way, is a big deal. It's always been mentioned, even biblically speaking. I mean, these names are mentioned, at least Jerusalem and Damascus, and so on and so forth.
So I would expect, I mean, listen, talking to Muslims, is it too difficult to demand that if this is a city that has existed since the beginning of mankind, this is a city that existed since 1900 BC, this is a city that was at the center of trade, north, south, east, and west, shouldn't someone have known about it? Shouldn't there be some reference to it? I would hope so, and I would hope you would think so too. That's what we're going to ask now. We're going to continue. But for the next episode, what I like to do is pull away from the Quran and let's see what the traditions say. What the traditions say about this place.
Amen. And thank you again, as always. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Can't wait until we continue with this in the next episode. Thank you for watching. This is Al-Fadi. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.